Ram Dass used to say, we're all just walking each other home. And isn't this true? There's one dreamer of all these dream bodies, just one dreamer. We're all just walking each other home to this, walking each other home to awakening, to the absolute freedom, peace beyond understanding, eternal bliss, and love beyond subject and object. This is our true nature. This is our home. This is what we come home to when we awaken. The dreamer awakens from this dream body, this personal self, this mind, these thoughts, and the sense of I. We return to our true nature, which is not this I, not this sense of a personal self, not this sense of separation. This is all the dream. This is all the illusion. This is the fire of samsara and suffering and ignorance. So we're all walking each other home from this. And when I mean all, I mean all. All of us are walking each other home in everything that we do. We don't know this until we awaken, but this is what's happening. And so the event that I did last Saturday, the deep listening event, I realized was that. It was a way that we're all walking each other home. We're all walking each other home. And the beauty of this was, as a teacher of awakening, of spiritual progression and awakening and home, it's very easy to live, once we've experienced this, on the mountaintop, in the silence and stillness and bliss of our true nature. And so I have lived in this way for years, really, in silence and bliss, without engaging in samsara, without engaging with other people, without engaging in any of the dream. And that was wonderful. That was a way of solidifying this awakening. It was an important factor in that. But at some point, we need to enter the marketplace. We need to come into the world where people are. And this is what the silent transmissions and other things that I do is. But this event where people come and ask questions and engage with each other and make statements or ask questions or whatever they're doing, this gathering is a walking each other home. This is stepping into the fire of samsara for me. We have no control over this. It shows us how little control, zero control we have over this dream in this life. That's part of it. There's no control here. We can't control what people do or what people say or anything. It just arises. But the sign of a good teacher is that everything that's said, every moment that happens, can be turned into a teaching of truth. We just let it happen. It's not our doing. It's not our cleverness or wisdom or anything. It just happens. It appears when you let it happen, when you're not in the way, when you don't go back to the sense of a personal I or control or anything like that. When you just allow it to happen, the wisdom comes by itself. Because it's not coming from you as a person. It's coming from the dreamer. It's coming from the one truth that there is, which is beyond all thought. But it can appear as thought, appear as words. So this is the value of that for me and why I feel called to do it. And the value for others is to see that we're all walking each other home. Everything that everybody says is an expression of the truth that's here, the underlying truth. Because when people express their suffering and their illusions and that kind of a thing, that's not truth. The illusion is not truth. But there's an underlying truth to it. So in last Saturday, somebody was expressing their suffering and deep suffering, and we all felt compassion for that suffering and understanding for that suffering. I mean, it was very clear. It was a statement of suffering. And the underlying truth of that is, where does this suffering come from? It comes from thoughts. It comes from the sense of a personal self. Always. All suffering comes from the sense of a personal self. Without the sense of a personal, separate self, there can be no suffering. This is what we awaken from. And when we awaken from it, there's no suffering. Because you have to have a personal self in order to have suffering. Without that sense of a personal self, there is no suffering. And it also comes from thoughts. So all the thoughts that were expressed were suffering. And the personal self is really just thoughts. The sense of I is thoughts, memories, experiences, thoughts. So I asked, after that expression of suffering, if he could take a moment and in this moment let go of all thought. And without thought, is there a problem? He didn't want to do it at first, but then when he did, he said, no, of course not. Yes, there is no problem without thoughts. There is no suffering without thoughts. There's just this stillness and silence, peace. But he immediately grasped back onto thoughts again, and as if that experience was not something for him, but I think a lot of people did get it. Because they were able to see his suffering, to feel his suffering, to feel compassion for his suffering, and also to be aware of their own suffering and where their own suffering comes from. So in that way, his expression of suffering was walking us home, walking each other home. Everything is like this. And as a teacher, it's my job to turn whatever is expressed into truth, the underlying truth of it, because it's all expressing truth. Truth is in everything. So to feel that, not through my wisdom or cleverness or anything like that, but just to allow it to arise by itself. And it always does seem to when I get out of the way. When there is no separate self, there is no illusion in the way. It's just here. It comes by itself. So that's my job in this thing. Any good teacher should be able to take anything that arises, all the things that we have absolutely no control whatsoever over, and turn that into a teaching of truth, a realization of truth. So that's my job in this whole scenario. It has some importance, but not that much, but some. Otherwise, we're listening to suffering and illusion, and that's all we get, just suffering and illusion. We're not going to learn anything if all we see is the suffering and illusion and we cannot see the truth that's underneath it. That's the important thing. That's the teaching. And it's very important because without the expression of the suffering and illusion, how can we teach about it? It has to be expressed. It has to be there as something that we can look at and examine and see the underlying truth. So in that way, everything that's expressed is walking each other home. It's very powerful and beautiful in gatherings like this. And people also share when they're more advanced on the path, their experiences of coming closer to home and the bliss that opens up and the feeling of aliveness and the feeling of awareness of things they were never aware of before. And they express that, and that's walking us home too. People who haven't experienced that yet see that, oh, it's possible because he experienced that or she experienced that, so that's possible. So everything is walking us home. Every expression, the expression of ignorance and suffering is walking us home. The expression of openness and wisdom and experiences, that's walking us home too. But one is not better than the other. They're all equally walking us home. So anything that happens in these gatherings is walking us home. And it's my job to simply allow truth to arise in that so that it can be seen. That's all. So yes, it would be easier for me to just rest in samadhi, in the absolute stillness and bliss of my true nature. Of course, that's easy, that's wonderful. But it doesn't help the world, really. I mean, it does in a way, because simply being in this place affects all of consciousness and the world itself. But there's another action that can happen from this, to step into the fire of samsara, to return to the marketplace, to step into the ignorance and illusion of samsara, into the dream, into the fire of the dream and suffering, and help from there, to be in that place and help from there. And yes, when people experience people sharing their suffering, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like peace. It doesn't feel like bliss. This is what we come for, to have that a feeling of being home in the silent transmissions and things. That's what people experience. But when people are sharing their suffering, we feel uneasy. We feel our own suffering arising. It triggers our own suffering, and we feel compassion for them. But we're learning equally from that. And if that is the underlying truth is expressed and shown in that suffering, that's a very, very powerful teaching. More so than a temporary experience of peace or bliss that we get from the silent transmissions, which is wonderful too. But even more is to see where our suffering is really coming from, where the illusions are coming from, where the sense of a separate self is not real and is the cause of all our suffering. That's a very essential teaching. This is what the Buddha discovered in his own suffering, where the suffering came from. He found suffering, the cause of suffering, and freedom from suffering. And that's the path of awakening. That's why suffering is so important in this dream, and so essential and so inevitable and so impossible to remedy or escape from within the dream. The dream is constantly promising that we can escape from suffering by buying this product, having this relationship, having this career, having wealth, having fame, having something like that will make us eternally happy and free of suffering. It's just more illusion. It's just more lies that keeps us in the dream. So we keep doing that. Maybe therapy will work. Maybe this, maybe that. But nothing does. That's part of our learning too, is to realize that nothing does. I've tried everything and nothing does. I have the wealth and I have the fame and I have the therapy and I have the relationship and I have all the things I was promised that would give me lasting peace, that the dream promises me, and none of them ever work. You know, it should be obvious because we can look at other people who have attained it and see that they don't have it either. But we think they do. We want to believe they do, so we keep plunging in over and over again until we realize and get it that that doesn't work. See, if we don't get it, it's like the carrot and the stick in front of us. It's like we can't get it, so we keep trying to get it. But once we get a bite of the carrot, we realize that doesn't work either. It's just more illusion. So it's wonderful to attain all those things, but only to show us that that's not it. I think Jim Carrey realized this, the actor and comedian Jim Carrey, who had a very successful career, a lot of wealth, all kinds of things like that. And somehow he came to the realization that that's not it. You know, it should be obvious for all the other people who have attained Academy Awards and great fame and that, but it isn't. But he got it. It's like, this isn't it. This is not it. George Harrison and the Beatles was the same. He attained everything that the dream promises you. You know, if you get this, you'll be happy. And he wasn't happy. It's shocking to have that experience because we work so hard for it. And my own life was like that. I had a lot of success as a filmmaker, you know, and won numerous international awards, over 100. And the first one that I won, I was so thinking that that would give me eternal happiness. I really believed that. And of course it didn't. It was very disappointing. Disillusionment. It was disillusioning, which is a wonderful word. It took away the illusion of the dream because I attained it and what I thought I would get wasn't there. Yes, it was wonderful for my career and all that, but the happiness that somehow I believed would come from that wasn't there. And it can't be. The dream cannot give you your true nature, cannot give you truth. It's an illusion. It's like you're not going to drink the water in a mirage, right? You see a mirage of water out in the distance from heat in the desert. You walk towards it, it disappears. You're not going to drink that. There's nothing to drink. It's just an illusion, a trick of the eyes. And the entire dream is an illusion and a trick of the eyes. It isn't real. And when we come home, this is what we're walking each other home to. We're seeing the illusions in the moment. In real life, we're seeing the illusions. We're seeing the cause of the suffering. We're seeing all that in what we're saying to each other. So I feel this is a very powerful thing, this group of walking each other home, all of us. It doesn't mean you don't have to have awakening or wisdom or anything to come. Everyone is walking each other home. People who have no interest in spirituality are walking each other home. We're all walking each other home. And it helps to have a teacher to see the underlying truth within everything that's happening in the dream. That's my place in this, my limited place in this scheme, in this function, you know, a facilitator and a pointer to the underlying truth that's within everything, because it always is. It always is. And again, this is not my experience, my wisdom, my anything that I hold. It's just happening in each moment. Truth is in each moment. It's not something we store. Oh, let me hold on to this as knowledge. No, knowledge doesn't really help. The experience in the moment helps, because that's real. That's where our eyes are really opened, in the moment, beyond thought. Something happens that's beyond thought. Thought is what's creating the misery and suffering. But there's something going on underneath that that's truth. And even the illusion of suffering can point to it, just as a mirage does. You see a mirage in the desert, you walk to the water, and it disappears as soon as you get there. You do that enough, and you kind of understand what a mirage is from your direct experience, that it's not real. It's the same thing that the dream is showing us. It's showing us its lack of reality. It's showing us where suffering comes from and why it's here, because we're believing the illusion in the dream. So I hope you'll join this Saturday. I'm going to do this coming Saturday as well, and maybe most of the Saturdays during the week, maybe not on Christmas Eve, unless people want it. You know, you just let me know if you want it, and I'll do one then. I'm happy to. I think it seems like an important thing to do. So I hope you'll join me. Thank you, my friend.